This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources families and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This show is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Here's your host, Trevor Sheeran.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. We are excited to come to you again. We are starting a little bit later today, so you get the benefit of us not being as tired.
Which we probably should go back and listen to our self-care episodes for our own self.
We should probably go listen to a bunch of our episodes for our own sake. And we hope that you're doing the same and sharing episodes that are meaningful to you and have been helpful. It's been really encouraging for Dr. Mayfield and I to be able to hear stories from you about how this show has been impacting you, and we would love to hear more. So feel free to reach out to us. Our email is candid@mayfieldcounseling.com. And we'd love to hear.
We're on track to do more than 20,000 downloads in the first 2 years, which is pretty cool. Thank
really
you for,
exciting.
For listening and sharing.
Yeah. Today we want to talk about something that we'll probably have to go back and listen to ourselves in several weeks. This idea of when you're doing all that you can. And I think there's a lot of different elements to that conversation.
Like doing your best is what you mean?
Yeah,
kind of.
Doing your best, or those moments when it feels like you're doing all that you can and yet it doesn't feel like enough. Or it doesn't feel good enough.
Well, and that's interesting because you use the term good enough, and when I have clients in my office, I always ask them, so like, who's good enough are you talking about? I think it was a good question to ask, right?
Yeah. So you're advocating for an individual definition of what good enough looks like.
Maybe. I mean, that's part of the reason we're having this conversation, right? Because I think, when I'm in a family setting, working with a client, and dad says, my son's not performing good enough, I look at the son and go, do you know what that means? And 9 times out of 10, the son's like, I think it's he wants me to try my best. I'm like, well, that doesn't answer my question. Like, what does that mean? So I think it goes back to, like we've talked about, like psychological expectations in a family setting, but also just expectations in general. Like, I mean, for example, I love baseball. I was a pretty good baseball player in high school, and my good enough, like my best, was pretty darn good. That was for high school. My best, if I wanted to play college, wouldn't have cut it. Right? Does that mean that I wasn't trying my best, that wasn't good enough, that I wasn't? So I think there's a lot of context that we need to look at.
When I was talking to a client the other day about unfavorable comparisons, and I think that plays a huge role in this conversation where we're constantly comparing ourselves unfavorably. I was giving the example of if I decide I want to start swimming, something that I rarely ever do. I did some classes at the YMCA back in like 5th grade, and that was about it. If I was to start swimming and have trouble with the breathing techniques of like, when do I raise my arm and breathe and all of those things, it would be a very unfavorable comparison to say like, Michael Phelps does this really well. Why am I not better?
Right, why can't I do it? Yeah.
And I think that while that's a pretty exaggerated example, it's not that far off from what we normally do.
Is it really exaggerated? I mean, you think about another example, if we're going to go down the, is like training for a marathon or a triathlon, right? Most people, there are some people that are, really competitive and really good that go in to try to beat other people, but most people don't join a marathon or a triathlon to beat somebody.
Yeah.
They're doing it to beat themselves.
Right.
Or
to meet a time that they want to get.
Meet my time, beat my time, and so how do you rate or measure good enough or best in something like that? Is a 10-minute mile good enough?
Right.
Well, for me, yeah. For somebody like one of our staff members who qualified for the Boston Marathon, no. Right? I mean, so, unfavorable comparison, but I also think it's understanding how we see the world. And so I think it's unique to each individual. But this is where I really harp on, is that the right word, harp? Focus in on, spend time on, whatever, with individuals and families. going, what is your family culture?
Mm.
Because now we can define things within the family culture,
Yeah.
and not pull from, the Smiths next door, or,
Right. My friend Joe Schmo.
Right. It's what is your family culture and what are the expectations that they're in.
Yeah.
But then are they realistic? So when I've worked, I think I've shared this story. I share this story a lot in my talks, but I'm not sure I've shared it on here, is that, about 3 or 4 years ago, I had a dad and mom come in, and they were like really concerned about their son, and more dad so than mom, and he was really wanting to prepare him for MIT. I'm like, well, that's great, so I'm going to be, I didn't know.
It's a high goal, it's
right,
a
it's
good goal.
I'm going to be seeing a junior, a senior, sophomore. Kid's 5 years old. Right, so not something that, how do we do things that are age appropriate? How do we do things? So I don't know. There's a lot that we can go.
So we've got unfavorable comparisons. We've also got unrealistic expectations. That's something that I want to talk about too. I think that as we're having this conversation, we need to find a way to appropriately evaluate, am I actually doing the best I can?
And that's a self-reflective question, not a me telling you.
Right. There's no scale that we can put that on. You answer these 15 questions that are associated to your view of colors, and we'll tell you if you're doing the best you can. Well, that's not how it works.
Let's, here's another example. I'm just thinking out loud here. So one of our counselors, Aaron Short, and he came over and helped me with my landscaping rock. We had like 10,000 pounds of rock we were to put into our yard. And he made this comment that I wanted to just take a shovel and smack him over the head with it. But he goes, research shows that, when you start feeling tired in a workout, you still have 60% left. And he goes, so you've only given 40%, and if you want to give up, he goes, just realize you have 60% left. And I'm, shoveling a rock going, shut up.
Right.
But I went back and researched that, and of course he's right. He's done his research and that kind of stuff. So for me to say I've tried my best and I'm giving up the first moment I get tired in a workout.
Yeah.
Well, science proves otherwise.
Yeah.
So I think the question is, how do we determine what our best is?
Yeah.
And I get that a lot with my teenage clients. Well, I tried my best. Well, when did you start studying for the math test? Oh, this morning. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
and I think recognizing too, I started studying for the math test this morning. If where I'm coming from is I've never studied for a math test.
Or this math test, or any math whatsoever.
And so by starting this morning, I was actually progressing in my efforts towards this math test.
Okay.
It may not have been the goal that I want to set for myself, but I am growing, and there's this idea of micro goals that can be really important in laying the groundwork for getting there, and that is the process of getting there.
So are you giving this individual an excuse, though, because they've been in school for the last, they're a sophomore in high school, and they should know better because of other subjects, not just math?
I think that's a great question.
Or do you take, and the question is or do you take, those micro goals, those small things, going, okay, good job.
Yeah.
You started studying this morning. Now let's learn from that. What could you do better or different next time? I think is a valid question as well. But if you take it into the grand scheme of things, and not just math, that one subject, but you take it into the grand scheme of things of school in general, and we know that good study habits begin, at least 2 to 3 days before a test or whatever. I don't know,
Yeah, I had a supervisor who was speaking to a member of my cohort once, saying, "You are on track, and if things don't change by next week, you will no longer be on track." And talking about how there is this progression of growth that we go on, but it has to stay a progression of growth. We don't get to just stop, ever. Like that, I wish that was an option in life, that we could just press pause on everything, take a nice long nap, and call it good. But most of the time, we have to continue to push and grow. And I think that for that person who has never studied for a math test ever, and decides to start studying that morning, the next step is studying the day before, and sooner and sooner, and finding the strategies that work for them. It's not just, oh well, I studied this morning, so I grew. I'm grown.
Well, I wonder too if realistically, if somebody has said, I'm excited, I studied this morning, that was really genuinely in that moment their best, then they didn't know any different.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody comes in and speaks into, hey, good job, and let's think about the bigger picture, does that belittle the best, or does that just help grow? And I think it helps grow. Helps grow.
I
right?
agree. Depending on how it's
Well,
given.
How it's
too.
given, sure.
And I think sometimes, like the child whose dad wants him to go to MIT, I think that is a squelching way to go about that, rather than an encouraging of like, where are you now? What's the next step? Our goal is here. Here's how that next step works towards that goal.
Right, and I think, I think that's something that we need to learn for ourselves, but also for how we engage our kids. Yeah. I was just thinking as you were talking about kind of the growth. We never stop. I think a tangible example would be Mayfield Counseling Centers. Mm-hmm. Right, we started out a little over 4 years ago, and if we just said, you know what, I hope people call us. I really do. We want to help people, and we've got 5 counselors here. We just want people to call.
That's how business works,
right? Right. No, I can't tell you. If we were to sit down and count how many community meetings and luncheons and emails and phone calls and free talks and all that kind of stuff we've had over the last 4 years, it would be probably in the thousands of hours, right? Mm-hmm. And we're at a place right now where our inquiry coordinator, Adam Smith, so you can give him a call, a little shameless plug if you need any help, right? 719-452-4803. But he gets about between 150 and 200 phone calls a month. Mm-hmm. And I'm asking you, have we stopped?
Oh, no.
Have we slowed down?
Nope.
No, right? Because we're still pushing that thing, and we're still learning and growing and going, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to try it this way. And so I think the best, when we talk about doing your best, it's going, okay, what do I have in front of me? And how am I going to utilize that? And then am I willing to get feedback and have somebody speak into, okay, I know that was your best in that moment. Think about this time. Think about this next time. And so, I know you and I have had, and our counselors here and our leadership, we've had a lot of people speaking into our lives going, good job, really good job. And
here's what you can do next.
How about this next time? Or how about this differently next time? And we could say, screw you.
Right.
Right? Which would be an attitude of not seeking our best. Or we can say, you know what, okay, I'll be teachable. I'll listen, and yeah, you're right. Or, you might be right, but it's not going to be the best for us, or whatever.
Yeah. As I was thinking about this episode, too, I was thinking about, the image of my mom at times when I was a kid, where she was...
Lovely, lovely, poor mom.
My lovely, lovely, poor
treasures.
I know that there were times when she was doing her absolute best, and she had pushed past that 40% into possibly close to the 100%.
Sure.
Where she literally could not do more, and it didn't seem good enough.
Right.
By her definition,
or yours, or
anyone else's. And I want to see if we can find a way to offer encouragement for the individuals who feel like that's all good and stuff, that I've been growing and pushing for the next step, but I'm so discouraged because it doesn't feel like anything's happening or I have anything left to give.
Well, you've shared your story on here, and you've shared, there's our Who Can Relate videos and all that kind of stuff, and people, so your mom, I think, you're a testament to your mom's faithfulness. Mm-hmm. All your siblings are, and how much she's worked and stayed consistent. But I can imagine in those moments of, I've done everything I can and nothing's changing. It doesn't feel good enough. Even though anybody from the outside perspective would go, dang, Julie, you're
look at all
you're
the
killing
things you're
it,
doing.
and you're doing a fantastic job.
Yeah.
So I think it's perspective is one big piece,
yeah.
right? And so who do we have speaking into our lives in that moment? I know your dad has said this too. They had a lot of people speaking in truth into their lives and that kind of stuff. So I think that's a big deal.
So having people around you that can offer another perspective.
Right, who's speaking that truth. But I think also too, coming back to whose standards are we comparing ourselves to, right? Because I won't speak for your mom, but I know in times in my life where I'm like, I have tried my best, and I'm looking around me going, that sucked,
Mm-hmm.
right? Who am I comparing myself to? Well, we talked about that earlier on, but could it be I'm comparing myself to somebody that is 2 inches taller than me, or faster than me, or smarter than me, and those things aren't bad that they are that, but how do I become comfortable and okay with me?
Yeah.
And I think in those moments, we talk about this quite a bit with the whole tension piece,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do we sit with that tension? Okay, I just gave my best, and it doesn't feel good enough.
Right.
But there's nothing more I can do. So I could get really upset, create some depression, anxiety, fear,
Be down on myself.
down on myself, shame, whatever.
Berate myself.
Or I
whatever
can
it
say,
looks
you know
like.
what? Okay, good job, Mark. You did your best, and it doesn't feel like it, and that sucks. Like, sit with that for a little bit. Maybe even grieve it a little bit, and go, okay, if that's my best, I'm proud of it, and I'm okay with it. But that all takes intuition, that takes grit, that takes resiliency, that takes good friends, mentors speaking into your lives, and I think it's just a presence of humility.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, that's off the top of my head right there.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think especially looking at, what is our definition of good enough?
Sure.
And recognizing any fallacies of unfavorable comparisons or unfair expectations. If I'm currently in grad school and working full time and running another podcast and trying to maintain a healthy marriage and
Wait, you're doing all that?
like if I'm doing all that, it would be so unreasonable for me to start a business or to
just let's be honest for a second. For you to compare yourself to where I'm at.
Yeah.
Right?
Very much. Yeah, that's a great example.
12, 13 years difference in age, right? But I can vividly remember when I was in your stage. And I struggled with comparing myself to people that were farther along.
Yeah.
But if I were to look at you and give you feedback, and man, Trevor, here's what I'm seeing that you're doing, and you're doing well. You've only been grumpy 3 or 4 days out of the last month, or what? But you've been handling and doing this well.
Yeah.
Now that's me giving you feedback, going, dang, dude.
It's a different perspective.
Right. But if you're staying stuck in it and you can't see beyond it.
Yeah.
Well, and you also didn't mention that you have a spouse that's getting her master's degree too. And all that
Yeah.
stuff. So right.
Good grief. I still don't know whether I'd recommend that or discourage that. It's probably both. But I think
May of next year you'll be like,
I'll have a better answer. I'll probably be totally on board once it's over. I think that's a really good point, because what I've noticed in myself, and I think is true of a lot of people that I've talked to, is the growth trajectory that I'm on, I can't force.
No.
There's ways for me to stay consistent in how I'm growing and make sure that I don't stop growing, but I can't jump levels, and I can't move forward faster than I am. And when I do that comparison of Mark does this therapeutic technique so well, and he has this many success stories from his clients, and he's seeing 15 clients a week, and I'm struggling seeing 4. And if I was to do that, it would, 1, be unfavorable, but 2, it doesn't take into consideration that may well be in my trajectory. It just may be further down the road.
Or more, or quicker.
Or quicker, or whatever, but
Yeah.
it's going to be on my path, and my path is far different than yours. You had a very different experience of trying to support family and kids and all of that, and I can't imagine having kids in my master's right now. I don't think I would be able to do it. And so recognizing the difference between individuals, yourself and the people around you, and pulling out some good things from their story that can encourage you without having to live up to what you see it, because I don't know the internal turmoil that you went through in your master's the way that I know mine.
We should write a book about that, because scare people away from doing their master's.
Here are 563 reasons for you not to get a master's.
But I think you're very right in that, and so it's how do you receive truth in those moments? Because, reflecting back, when I was your age, you're leaps and bounds farther along intellectually, I think knowing who you are spiritually, all those kinds of things than I was at that time. So what does that mean for your trajectory? Who knows? But that's cool, right? And so I think it's being okay. That's the thing that I don't think we've said overtly in this podcast, is being okay with where you're at, and not being okay with where you're at, and then reality testing the effort within that.
Yeah.
And I think if you can say, okay, I'm okay with where I'm at, and with all the things I've got going, so with all the things that you've got going right now, I'm sure there's things in your life right now that you're like, I feel like I'm dropping the ball.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? But when you take stock on everything that you've got going on, can you sit back and go, okay, I'm doing the best with what I've got right now? And if you can say that, then I think you're fine.
Yeah. And
I think that's for our listeners too. It's not the comparison game, it's not the expectations game, but it's going, okay, with what I've got right now, maybe you're a mom of 4 kids under the age of 5 right now listening, going, I feel like nothing is happening. I can't get the laundry done, I can't do any of this kind of stuff. Well, you know what? Are your kids alive?
Right.
Are they thriving? Then you're doing the best you can right now,
right?
Are you and your husband connecting on all that? Then. So I think it's that taking stock of everything that's going on and going, yeah, I'm doing a pretty darn good job.
Yeah. Laundry may not be done, but at least there is laundry, and at least the house still exists.
Right. And my kids know that I love them, and but I think that somebody needed to hear that today. That's your best.
Yeah. And our second shameless plug of the episode, 2 shameless plugs actually. So next week we're going to talk a little bit about self-compassion and self-soothing, because I think that's a really important, essential aspect of being able to accept where you are, and to be okay with your good enough. And so we'll be talking about that next week. And also, sometimes we do need that other perspective of somebody to say, hey, look at all the things that you're doing and how well you're doing in all of them when you look at the big picture. And you may not feel like you have anybody in your life that can fill that role for you. So we would encourage you to take our phrase of a hired friend and call Adam Smith and meet with a counselor. It doesn't have to be this long, dedicated process where you're in counseling for years and years. It could be
6 sessions.
6 sessions. It could be 4 sessions. It could, the average American goes to 1 session, which we don't recommend, but it's better than nothing. Right. And I think that just having somebody who can hear you say, this is how I feel, and for them to say, it makes a lot of sense that you would feel that way,
right,
because of all of these things that you told me, can do so much for our hearts and our spirits.
Yeah. And then also, I think just save the date, November 2nd, 2019, at New Life Church here in Colorado Springs. We will be hosting the 3rd annual Springs Mental Health Summit. This year, it's helping our community become mentally and emotionally well, our families become mentally and emotionally well. And so if you're in wherever you are, if you want to come join us, Colorado in November is a lot of fun. It's beautiful. It might have some snow, but it's just gorgeous. You can go to springssummit.org. And if you use the code Mayfield, Mayfield, you can get 25% off your registration, and we would love to see you.
We'll catch you next week.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, you can email candid@mayfieldcounseling.com or call 719-452-4803.